Okay, hello all to you. My name is Thierry Hengen. I'm working in Luxembourg for the Ministry of Energy and Spatial Planning in the Department for Spatial Planning, and I'm responsible for cross-border cooperation and monitoring. And I'm in charge of the geographical information system of the greater region. And I am also the administrator of the geoportal of the greater region. Also part of the European cross-border monitoring network that was built up by the German BBSR, and where I also met Julita.
My name is Dagmar Keim. I work at the City of Amsterdam as the Department of Metropolitan Area and the Department of Urban Planning and Sustainability. I'm involved in Matrix, especially in the working group SURE, which is a Euro Delta. That is the area from Lille to Cologne to Amsterdam. So that's why I thought this is interesting to get a touch a little bit about the cross-border monitoring, since this is one of our biggest issues. We're also working right now we're doing an ESPON research where we look at the transport system at that scale. And definitely there's a lot of problems with matching data on that scale. Okay, that was a side walk, and my colleague Klaas Bindert, he's really the person who knows a lot about maps. Klaas Bindert, you might want to introduce yourself.
Yes, well, my name is Klaas Bindert, De Haan. I'm working for the same department as Dagmar, and I'm the creator of mapsamsterdam.nl. There's also another website, data.amsterdam.nl, and that's the official data point of Amsterdam, and they also have a map viewer in it, but it's a different approach. They have a lot of data about the key basic registrations, about people, about houses, and Maps.Amsterdam has a lot of spatial data, policy data, and it's all, every map is one theme. And so it's very, I believe that when you make a map, only part of the people are interested in that map, about that theme, and not about all the other themes. So you don't have to mix housing plans with the trees, or maybe you want to do it, and then you can use the sliding panel. But most systems in the world are a collection of all the data sets and all the maps, and then users get confused. So that's a different approach from Maps Amsterdam. But it's we still use it, and I think it's the best system in the world.
I can only agree with you, because I love these maps. Really, they are so interesting. I have several my favorites, like barbecues in parks, or dogs areas for dogs in parks. I think this is really very human. This is a human scale, because I'm not a special planner, although I'm working in a special planning office, but I'm dealing more with the regional development, and I have sometimes problem with reading those maps, which have this ambition to present the whole world. This is really something only for specialists, and in your case, this is something really very user-friendly. Okay, I will now give the floor to our last guest, Henk Bouwman. Could you shortly present yourself, Henk?
Yes, hello, Julita. Good to see you. Good to see you all. We do it all online now. Unfortunately, thank you for your invitation. I'm happy to join this, and that's for two reasons. My name is Henk Bouwman. I'm the Secretary General for Matrix, which is there. It's a network for metropolitan regions in Europe, and we focus mainly on practitioners, so people like Dagmar, people who really do things, and not so much the political level. We are at the moment actually thinking about collecting data, and I think that is also why I think it's interesting to follow what you're doing. We have in the past, we have collected data from our member regions, and that has been done once, maybe twice, I don't know. But of course, the thing is to update that every time. And at the moment, we are about to initiate work on collecting, again, data, specific data from metropolitan regions. And I show an example, which is a little booklet, which is done by Métropole de Lyon, Grand Lyon. And they have set up, let's say, a very simple content page in terms of how they would like to collect certain data. And we think of interpreting that, translating that to a European level. So it means that we can have some basic information about, for instance, governance, but also how things are mapped in those areas. And the purpose is that members can use it to benchmark. What we notice at the moment is that we get questions every now and then from members to if we can provide them, let's say, with that data, because they are benchmarking, they want to benchmark, let's say, their city or their region towards other areas in Europe. And we have it, but it's in general outdated. So we think that data, let's say, also according to the questions we get every now and then, that this data is important to capture. But of course, it is important to, let's say, to define how. Because indeed, exactly, you can have this very thick Eurostat kind of books with all kind of data, the shoe sizes and whatever is in there. Shoe sizes spread over Europe, but that's not very helpful. And then there's a personal thing. I have about 4,000 atlases. So if you would like to visit me once and you are crazy about maps, I collect atlases and maps, which is a bit weird. And it's not always, my family doesn't always like it, because it takes a lot of space. But let's say, I think mapping, I'm Dutch from origin. Mapping in the Netherlands is from dates back. It's a very traditional thing, I would say. And interestingly, when you see portraits in the National Museum in Amsterdam of let's say, very important families, traders, the big families in Amsterdam, often they are portrayed with a map in the back on the wall. And that's quite special, because you have other countries where they have sculptures or art or whatever kind of other things, let's say, which they like to show on their portraits. In the Netherlands, it was maps. And that was, of course, it had everything to do with the trading history, but also with the land making in the Netherlands. So there were important Amsterdam families who showed their new polders on the map, and it was in the back of their family portrait. So it's a sort of interesting tradition. Of course, I live in France now, which has also with Napoleon an important map tradition, but it is indeed we often stick to let's say, very traditional and often too overloaded maps in terms of information. But it's a very powerful tool, I think, also in discussions with people, with citizens, with politicians, you name it. It's a very important and useful tool. So I think it is very good that data and the way you show data, whether it's in a sort of formal map in terms of a geographical map, or it is in another kind of type of drawing, I think it's really interesting to explore that again and not forget that tool, that tradition. So I'm very interested, but that's for later. Also, what Klaas Binet is doing, so I will absolutely check on those maps, because I think it's really it is really an important tool.
Luxembourg, as you may know, is a quite fairly small country, which is in between Germany, France, and Belgium. And basically, we are somehow the economic core of the so-called Greater Region, which is made up of Luxembourg and the surrounding areas in Germany, France, and Belgium. It's a very big area, that's why it's called Greater Region. Luxembourg is the economic core. It's an important financial hub in Europe. It's very attractive in terms of employment, or salaries, and therefore it attracts a high number of cross-border commuters every day to Luxembourg. At the moment, this year, we count more than 200,000 cross-border commuters who enter Luxembourg every day from the neighboring countries, about 50% from France, 25% from Germany, and from Belgium each. Therefore, Luxembourg somehow is the center of a cross-border functional area. This means there are a large number of functional interdependencies between Luxembourg and neighboring surrounding areas in terms of employment, of course, because we are attracting these commuters, but also in terms of social and environmental interdependencies. Employment flows create traffic, transport, but they also create social linkages. People come here for social contacts, so meet their families and friends, go shopping, visit tourist places, or have other interactions within the country, and vice versa for different activities. Even for shopping, for leisure activities, it's the same, and to visit family and friends. So it's a highly integrated functional cross-border area. And therefore, we have a high interest in cooperating with our neighbors in order to create balanced win-win situations in terms of spatial development. Talking as a spatial planner as I am myself, spatial development across borders has always been an important factor for Luxembourg and for our ministry. And that's why we ourselves have initiated and been part of many cross-border development initiatives, plans on a local, regional, and on a national level, and even on European level, let's say. This means we are initiating many cross-border cooperations on the scale of agglomerations. For example, of south of Luxembourg, there's a city called Esch, which is on a French border, and there we're trying to build a cross-border cooperation more on the level of an agglomeration or a city level. We're also having cross-border cooperations with our German partners on the Moselle River, where we are also trying to build up like a territorial. We did already. We have already built a territorial vision for this area based on spatial planning concepts. Let's say it like this, and we are doing the same for the whole greater region. There we are working. Actually, we are finalizing basically a territorial vision for the spatial development of the greater region, together with all the neighboring areas. It was this was made within a larger Interact project. It's a so-called spatial development concept of the greater region, if we translate it to English. And that's why there comes into effect spatial monitoring. In order to build such spatial concepts, you need to have territorial evidence. You need to have an idea about the territorial dynamics as for employment, for demography, for transport, and for environmental issues, just to name the most important ones. And you need territorial evidence. For this, you need data, and you need also mapping to visualize these events, these trends in a spatial dimension. And that's why in 2010, there was created Geographical Information System of the Greater Region, a monitoring tool shared and financed by the partners of the Greater Region. This was first done within 3 years of Interact project. And afterwards, the project was continued without European funds, only funded by the partners. Okay. And this we do with a convention where everybody is giving a certain share of the financial contribution necessary to run the project. So it's basically a core instrument which is supporting the decision-making of the political decision-making in the greater region, mostly for spatial development, but not only. Meanwhile, it also developed to an instrument and a tool for any type of territorial evidence to support all forms of cross-border cooperations, for Interact projects, but also for the so-called working groups of the greater regions, which are supporting basically, which are the technical element of the cross-border cooperation within the greater region.
Okay, thank you very much. That is why we are on a good way, because we have a very similar situation that we are right now beginning with the methodology and the needs of partners, what they would expect from this kind of monitoring system, and the next step should be some ideas how to introduce it. But I would have another question, which is the standardization of data, because we have here to do with different countries, different methodologies. So is there any national regulations about how the data should be collected to be so that you are able to just show the common picture after your work? How it works?
So basically, of course, this is basically a major issue. Data collection is done normally rather independently between the different countries. Also, so it's difficult basically to ensure cross-border harmonization. So every country basically has certain rules or even laws about the data they have to produce. Most of the data, also many of them have to produce for Eurostat, but Eurostat is producing data mostly on a national level, sometimes NUTS 2, NUTS 3 level, which is fairly large and doesn't always, let's say, is not always appropriated for cross-border cooperation and cross-border monitoring, because you need quite local data, let's say on a municipal level, if possible. So basically the legislations at the moment in Europe and in the countries are not per se promoting or helping cross-border monitoring as such. That's also one of the major issues we addressed in the European cross-border monitoring network. We try to go towards European actors, to Eurostat, and to sensibilize them about our need for more harmonized data on the quite local level for the needs of cross-border monitoring.
On national scale, there are rules, there are laws. Every municipality has to register the basic registrations, and that's also everything is defined how to do it. But on local scale, there are no rules about how to register the dog grounds or the playgrounds or the trees or so most of the times I get just an Excel with data about points, or maybe a GIS file, map, and then in maps we have the rule that every map has an owner, and he or she is responsible for the map and for the content in the map. That's very important. Otherwise, you collect data, and after a year, it's not recent anymore. It's rubbish. So initially, I get an Excel or a GIS map, and most of the owners, when they have a dynamic map, they have also a map behind a login. To manage their own map, so they can draw new lines or points or shapes on it. They can change all the values, and so they are responsible for the map. And that's and it's also I don't have to be an intermediary between the data and the map. They can do it all by themselves. So, but there are no rules for that.
The Dutch situation is indeed that there is, like in any country, I would say almost, there is, of course, a sort of National Bureau of Statistics or something like that. And it has different names, but it is more or less what happens, or what exists everywhere. When you look around Europe, so as soon as you cross the border, there are basics that are similar, but there are lots of information types that are different, that are differently measured. And for instance, in Germany, we see that even per Bundesland, it is different. So we have had these discussions also with, for instance, with the Metropolitan Hamburg, which is an island more or less in other relatively, in terms of surface, it's a small island in a relatively wide area, and to measure, for instance, to use data and to compare data, for instance, for the use of public transport systems, it's very difficult because they measure in a different way. So I think even in countries itself, I remember from the Netherlands, when the Netherlands started to digitalize their maps, let's say the maps that municipalities, that cities use, that I think it took at least 10 years to sort of standardize, you know, how a tree was sort of pointed out on the map. Maybe it was even longer. Somewhere in the 80s it started, and then it took quite a while to sort of standardize that. Let alone when it comes to more complicated data, or let's say the data which you talk about, I think in terms of cooperation, whether it's economics or what I see also in the comparisons in France, it is orchestrated by an organization called the it is an association of French municipalities, the FNAU. They have orchestrated, I think, and it took them 15 years at least to let's say to have a sort of standardized set of data. So this kind of data we need as a basis, and from there we can move on. So I think it is still an issue, and as Thierry said, although there is the Eurostat and there's all this, let's say they measure things on all these nuts levels, it's often not the type of information you want, and it's often also not on the scale you want it, because these, as we I think all know, the use of the nuts levels is a bit outdated. I mean, of course, we talk a lot about the functional urban area at the moment. Maybe that might help, but there's a lot of discussion still on whether that's the good way of looking at areas. So it is still a big discussion, but I think it's not only for cross-border monitoring, but I think in general, when you look at urban or EU policies, it would be fantastic if we have indeed a more standardized set of data, types of data. But it's something we should all, I think, push for. And I think, to be honest, I think one of the main, or maybe the focal point for that should be indeed Eurostat, because that's a very obvious place to have that organized. But we are not there yet.
Yeah, but maybe Thierry, I would like to ask you to say a little bit more about our initiative, which is the network of European monitoring of cross-border areas, which the Federal Institute for Building and Special Planning in Germany from Bonn organized the whole initiative, because this is exactly the point, or the strategy, or the question we ask ourselves, what to do, what kind of instruments or regulations we can introduce at the European level to improve the situation.
Yes, that is very true. I mean, this monitoring system on the European level was initiated, as you said, by the German Federal Office, the BBSR, that's the abbreviation, shorter. And basically they have, I mean, we basically all share the common issues when it comes to cross-border monitoring. Lack of data, lack of comparable data, lack of available data on local level, on a scale that we can use, which, because it's the most important for cross-border monitoring, which is mostly done on a regional level. Like also between Poland and Germany, we talk about a regional level. We don't talk about national level. It's really like fairly on a special functional area. And as Hank said, the functional links are crucial to cross-border cooperation. And this is done mostly in a local level. So basically this network was initiated based on the idea that we all share the common issues of data availabilities. And the German BBSR basically themselves, they launched, I think 3 years ago, a project. It's called the MORO. It's like a model for helping spatial development and spatial monitoring on the German borders. And they want to build basically a monitoring system, a cross-border monitoring system on the German borders. That's why they asked all neighboring countries if they want to be part of it. They involved the Bundesländer, so the regional level in Germany, which are situated on the borders of Germany, and they started this project. And the Greater Region was also one of the members of this project. And they already basically had, in the end of the project, it was clear many of the data that are necessary for building such a monitoring system not available yet. And we need basically to create a mass of partners, a critical mass of partners that can like form a network. That's why this European cross-border has been created, in order to first gather all the what is basically our objectives, what we want to achieve, what do we need in the future, who we have to address in terms of getting those data in the future. And that's why this network was built. And I think many countries have joined our network. I think France, Germany, all the countries neighboring Germany, but even across Europe have meanwhile joined this initiative. Also regional monitoring systems have also joined this system, this network. And I think it's the main idea, as I said before, to sensibilize the European actors which are producing data like Eurostat about our needs, to tell them we are so many actors and we all share the same needs and issues of cross-border availabilities of data. And that's why we come towards you. These are we are maybe talking about specific indicators which are particularly important for cross-border monitoring. And we would need those, for example, on a certain scale. By being together, by creating this critical mass, we have more chances for lobbying our needs on the European level. And I think this is one of the major impacts and the major ideas. Secondly, it's also a platform for exchanging between the network partners about our activities. For example, your Interact project that we launched now on German-Polish border is very interesting, I think. It's also best practice towards the need and the importance of this cross-border monitoring. And we can exchange between us, maybe also like this interview, also for me, a best practice idea how to exchange information, and we get to know each other, and we get to know maybe about how we can improve our own situation in the future.
Maybe I could tell you something about the storytelling. As I now understand, I am it's like it's a different scope. Thierry and Henk are talking about, and what I'm talking about. I'm talking about local and system, and not about cross-border and anything. So, but storytelling, it's a feature in a lot of map viewers these days. It's kind of hype, and it's not always very user-friendly. It's like a website with maps. In Maps Amsterdam, we have two kinds of storytelling. Within one map, you can guide the user to certain phenomena on the map. Like yesterday, a new map was released about corridors and slums, very narrow corridors in the city center. And you can, with storytelling, you can show the people some very interesting points on the map, or lines on the map in this case, and tell something about it. So you guide the user. Another one is a kind of atlas with different maps or videos or pictures or everything, every medium you want to show, you can show it within in different frames together, and that's also a kind of storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet the impact, it's just to give some more information to the user, what's the map about, and to show some very interesting things on the map. You guide them by the hand to show it on the map. Mm-hmm. That's my point of view about storytelling.
Yeah, and maybe I would like to add, as a user, it also tells you a little bit about the data and the issues that the city is interested in. Because you can see, for example, maps about the bleeding of a certain kind of tree. So you think, oh, is that a problem? So you're also starting to understand a little bit why certain decisions are made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for example, we have a map about housing prices, where you can see the development of housing prices. And I think this is really influencing right now also the decision where to buy a house. You're going to buy a house at the location where the housing prices have risen a lot, or are you looking on the edges where you think it will rise? So it's also becoming a little bit part of speculation for individuals.
Do you want to add something, Hank?
Just wrote to Dagmar as well. I remember not so long ago there was the issue in Amsterdam about the tourism. Well, that is at the moment maybe not so much of a problem anymore. At least not the number of tourists. But still, it was also the city of Amsterdam who said actually we would like to have to show these tourists that there is much more than only the center of Amsterdam, but that you can also let's say travel not far from Amsterdam center to see all kind of other very interesting areas. And that was also this sort of map I remember, you know, with let's say showing with images with sort of pictograms, you know, the characteristics of areas in a wider region around Amsterdam. So I think in general it is often, you know, you can use maps to sort of change perceptions of people. Exactly. You know, and that is at the moment there is a discussion going on even in the UN Habitat, where they want to maybe rethink the Mercator projection of the world map, the globe, let's say, where Greenland is huge and let's say Europe is always in the middle and other parts of the world are sort of on the side. It has very much to do with perception. So if you would like to let's say to support policies, I think maps are a very strong means to do that, let's say, and to show people, you know, in different ways about whatever aspects. But again, I think it is very much related to the perception people have on issues. So like Dagmar said, with housing prices, or you can imagine maps where you put all the schools in, or green areas, how close that is. I see these maps in Lyon and Paris, where, let's say, green areas at the moment, especially with the pandemic, are very important to have it close. And they're mapping those things now to show people also where they can go, you know, during the pandemic and with the restrictions we have at the moment. So.
Yes, I agree with you with this question of changing perspective. I think that it also can raise our awareness on some issue, and awareness is the most important value of doing politics today. This is something what we should always have in mind. Thierry.
And you sit more or less on the border with Germany. I don't know, but I can imagine that when you see a map of Poland, you sit on the edge, more or less of Poland. But of course, when you look at other things, and when you take away those national borders, you are all of a sudden in the middle of this Middle Europe.
Exactly.
So it is in that sense, it can really make a big difference on how you show these things. I mean, whether you are on the edge or whether you are in the middle, that is with every presentation that someone gives in our network, they always put their region in the middle of the map, in the middle of the world. And that's a sort of interesting habit, I would say. But it is also important on, for instance, national scale, or when you say the Nordic countries are, let's say, peripheral in Europe. Well, that might be true, but when you turn the globe, they're in the middle. It can be very tricky sometimes how things are projected. So you should be aware of it.
Yeah, but what I find interesting as well is, for example, the maps tool. Most people, I think, are looking actually at the car map of housing value and where will be new housing, because housing is, of course, a big issue in Amsterdam. But then you come to that map and then you see very easily directly other themes. And then you get interested and you want to know, oh, is this all available? Oh, wow, this is really interesting. And then people start looking through this and they start talking. I showed this yesterday evening to my children, and we had a whole discussion with the children, and their awareness became so much bigger because of this very easy, understandable maps. So this was very interesting.
Real estate sellers are using that as well. So if you look for a house on real estate sites, you know, you see often that they say, well, this is the house, but this is the environment. So they sort of provide you also graphically, let's say, information on the environment. So I think some sectors already use it much more than we sometimes do, which is, you know, we should learn from that as well.
Yeah, but I would agree with Dagmar. We have the same. We did it many hours in our office that we just found, for example, this map with trees, and we were so fascinating about all the trees in Amsterdam. And then there is also a map of, is your roof suited for renewable energy? And all the different information are really fascinating. But Thierry wanted to say something.
No, I just wanted to share all the inputs about this. I think it's also important that a map can also help that people are more identify themselves with their own area. Like special local maps, Amsterdam, they are really important, and people like feel themselves part of a certain area. They know more about it. They also find out about certain aspects. Special local maps have so much information which are so interesting, especially like the idea of this housing development maps. I think it's sometimes even quite sensible data, and it's very interesting that it's really shared openly on such a local area. Very interesting.